Long ago, powerful kingdoms rose across the world, ruled by kings whose lives were very different from ours today. These kings were not just rulers of land, but protectors of people, traditions, and the future of their dynasty. In royal palaces, it was common to see many queens, but this was not always about love or personal choice. One major reason was politics, because marriage was the strongest way to create alliances between kingdoms. When a king married a princess from another land, it often meant peace instead of war. To keep a kingdom alive, a king needed strong heirs who could continue the royal bloodline. But this responsibility placed silent pressure on the queen, whose role was closely tied to succession. In those times, many children did not survive due to disease and poor medical care. So having more wives was seen as a way to protect the future of the dynasty. Queens were often viewed as carriers of legacy rather than individuals with personal dreams. Religion also played a role, as many beliefs supported kings having multiple marriages. Queens took part in rituals, believing their duty was connected to divine will. Society expected kings to marry many times to strengthen status and family honor. The number of queens became a symbol of power, wealth, and royal strength. To other kingdoms, many wives meant influence, stability, and control. Behind the palace walls, kings often lived emotionally distant lives, shaped more by duty than feelings. Queens also experienced loneliness, even while living among many people. Although they shared the same palace, rivalry and separation were common among queens. Kings were constantly advised to think about the kingdom, not their own hearts. This distance slowly created emotional gaps that no ceremony could truly fill. From a young age, princes were trained to become future rulers and warriors. Queens watched their children grow with hope, fear, and quiet patience. The palace walls themselves told stories of generations shaped by the same system. Every decision a king made was carefully observed by nobles and elders. Royal families followed strict order, where emotion rarely came before tradition. When borders were threatened, marriages became tools to prevent wars and protect kingdoms. Old records reminded kings that every marriage carried political weight. Over time, queens learned to accept their roles, even when emotions were set aside. A king often stood between duty to the state and his own inner conflict. Many kings ruled entire kingdoms, yet spent long nights completely alone. Public celebrations hid the private sacrifices made inside palace walls. Even during joy, some queens remained observers rather than participants. Princes were raised not just as sons, but as future symbols of power. Behind polite smiles, competition and comparison quietly grew. In moments of silence, kings questioned the weight of their own legacy. In public, kings had to appear strong, fair, and in complete control. But once alone, the weight of responsibility slowly caught up with them. Queens carried their emotions quietly, maintaining dignity even in disappointment. Daily life inside the palace followed strict rules, leaving little space for closeness. A king often stood between what he felt and what he was expected to do. Marriages were also used to impress allies and secure political trust. For queens, personal feelings were often hidden behind royal appearance. Repeated ceremonies slowly turned marriages into routine duties. Even in quiet moments, kings reflected on choices that shaped many lives. Faith gave some queens strength to accept a life chosen by tradition. Each new day followed the same pattern of duty, order, and responsibility. Princes were shaped early to carry the weight of future leadership. Senior queens guided others, passing down rules they once had to learn. Every choice a king made closed one path and opened another. Night often brought quiet moments of reflection that daylight never allowed. Royal ceremonies reminded everyone that lineage mattered more than personal wishes. Behind closed doors, queens allowed themselves small moments of emotion. The king slowly understood the unseen cost of the system he followed. Queens learned to live side by side, even when their hearts felt distant. By sunrise, duty once again took priority over feeling. In front of the people, kings showed confidence even when they carried heavy burdens inside. Queens often found peace not in happiness, but in quiet acceptance. Over time, these traditions became normal, passed down without question. Even among many queens, competition and silence were common. Duty slowly became a way of life, leaving little room for personal choice. Looking back, kings began to understand the cycle they were part of. Time softened emotions, turning pain into understanding. The next generation moved forward, shaped by the same system. In the end, power faded, but the impact of those choices remained. This reminds us that history is not just about rulers, but about the human cost behind power.